High Commander Zixtal's compound eyes reflected the holographic display of Earth's failing defense grid, each facet showing a different fragment of humanity's impending defeat. The central chamber of the Galactic Council's luminary station hummed with the quiet satisfaction of beings who believed victory was finally within their grasp. Observe, Zixtal's mandibles clicked in the precise rhythm of scientific certainty. The human defense force has lost 37% of their remaining capital ships in the past solar rotation alone. The hologram zoomed in on the scattered remnants of Earth's once proud fleet, now reduced to desperate defensive formations around their core worlds. Junior analyst Kriva, whose crystalline form sparkled under the chamber's ambient lighting, dutifully updated the projection models. By all calculations, High Commander, the humans cannot maintain their defense grid beyond another 60 rotations. Their resource consumption exceeds their production capacity by a factor off. The analyst's voice trailed off, their crystalline structure dimming slightly as they rechecked their instruments. Zixtal noticed the hesitation immediately. "Speak, analyst. What anomaly have you detected?" "High Commander, I'm detecting unusual energy signatures at the edge of human space. They're unlike anything in our database." Kriva's form pulsed with uncertainty. The magnitude suggests vessels larger than any recorded in galactic history, but that's clearly impossible. The structural requirements alone would. "Show me," Zixtal interrupted, their professional demeanor cracking slightly. The hologram shifted, displaying a sector of space that should have been empty. Instead, massive energy readings pulsed like newborn stars. From the shadows of the chamber's upper tier, Ambassador James Morrison of Earth watched the alien's reaction with carefully concealed satisfaction. 15 years of watching his people die, of maintaining a brave face while signing treaties that ceded human colonies to the hegemony. It had all led to this moment. Zixtal's appendages danced across the holographic controls, running simulation after simulation. These readings must be false. The humans lack the resources, the technology, the industrial capacity. They stopped abruptly, noticing something that made their exoskeleton pale. When was the last comprehensive scan of the Sol system's outer planets conducted? The question hung in the air as the chamber's atmosphere shifted from smugness to growing concern. Another analyst, this one a floating gas bag of neural tissue, pulsed with realization. The human's Neptune defense grid has always interfered with deep scans. We assumed it was atmospheric interference. You assumed. A new voice cut through the chamber. Ambassador Morrison stepped into the light, his weathered face bearing a smile that made several council members instinctively back away. "That's humanity's greatest advantage, you know. You all assume we think like you do." The hologram suddenly flickered as new data flooded in. Emergency signals from the hegemony's frontline bases painted a picture that none of the alien strategists could process. Kriva's crystalline form vibrated with distress as they reported, multiple vessels detected, energy signatures increasing exponentially. "High Commander, these ships, they're larger than small moons." Morrison walked to the center of the chamber, every eye and sensory organ fixed on him. "You called us primitive because we still value instinct alongside logic. You denied us membership in your galactic community because we were too aggressive, too unpredictable." He gestured to the hologram, where the first images of humanity's dreadnoughts were beginning to appear. "You never asked yourselves why we accepted those insults so quietly." High Commander Zixtal's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation in their species. Impossible. No species would risk building vessels of that scale. The power requirements alone would tear them apart. Impossible. Morrison's smile grew wider. "We had 3 generations to solve those impossible problems, while you watched our defense fleet fight and die, counted our resources, and calculated our defeat. Humanity's greatest project was hidden in plain sight." He turned to leave the chamber, pausing at the doorway. "You should have remembered, Commander, humans have a long history of winning impossible wars." Behind him, The chamber erupted into chaos as the full implications became clear. The war wasn't ending. It was about to begin anew, and humanity had been preparing for this moment since before first contact. In the hologram, the massive shapes of Earth's dreadnoughts emerged from Neptune's storms, their silhouettes blotting out the stars themselves. Commander Jack Reynolds stood on the bridge of the UES Thermopylae, his hand resting on the same command rail his grandfather had helped install 40 years ago. Through the massive forward viewport, Neptune's swirling storms created a perfect curtain of chaos that had hidden humanity's greatest achievement for decades. Final systems check complete, Commander. Lieutenant Emma Davidson reported from her station, her voice carrying the weight of generations of preparation. All 7 dreadnoughts report ready for combat emergence. Reynolds nodded, his eyes tracing the familiar lines of his ship. Though ship seemed an inadequate word for something larger than many cities, the Thermopylae stretched 27 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull incorporating materials and technologies that the rest of the galaxy had deemed too unstable or theoretical to use in combat. Engineering reports stellar core at optimal containment. Chief Engineer Marcus Torres called out, his hands dancing over holographic controls that monitored the artificial star burning at the heart of the massive vessel. She's eager to show the galaxy what she can do, sir. The bridge crew, 300 of the ship's 20,000 personnel, maintained their disciplines even as anticipation charged the air. They were the culmination of a project that had started before any of them were born, a secret so well kept that even most of Earth's military had no idea these ships existed. Commander, the ship's AI, Atlas, materialized as a holographic presence beside Reynolds. The Hegemony fleet has begun their push toward the Saturn defense line. Our window for maximum strategic impact opens in 17 minutes. Reynolds allowed himself a small smile. The AI's presence was yet another advantage the aliens hadn't counted on. While they feared and restricted artificial intelligence, humanity had embraced it, creating true partnerships between human intuition and machine precision. Signal the fleet, he ordered, his voice carrying the authority of 3 generations of Reynolds, who had commanded this ship in secret. Operation Thunderstrike is go. All ships, prepare for combat emergence. Through the viewport, he could see the other dreadnoughts moving into formation. The UES Marathon, specialized for long-range artillery with its massive rail guns. The UES Leonidas, built around an experimental gravity wave generator. Each ship represented a different approach to space combat that the Galactic community had dismissed as too dangerous or impractical. Sir, Davidson's voice cut through his thoughts. Message from Admiral Bradley on the UES Sparta. Remember your grandfather's words. Reynolds nodded, the phrase bringing back memories of his grandfather's last day on the bridge. The old man had gathered the crew and told them, we're not building these ships to be safe. We're building them to ensure humanity has a future. All hands, this is the commander, Reynolds keyed, the ship-wide comm. For 3 generations, we've trained in secret, prepared in secret, and waited in secret. The galaxy thought they had us figured out. A young, reckless species that would either fall in line or be conquered. He paused, watching as the final launch preparations were completed. Today, we show them why humanity has survived every challenge we've ever faced. Today, we show them that what they call reckless, we call necessary. What they call impossible, we call Tuesday. A light chuckle rippled through the bridge at the old family joke. Reynolds' grandfather had always said that humanity's greatest achievements usually happened on Tuesdays. Combat emergence in 5 minutes, Atlas announced. All systems operating at peak efficiency. The other ship's AIs report ready. Reynolds straightened his uniform. Signal the fleet. Launch in 5 minutes. For Earth, for humanity, and for every soul who worked in secret to give us this chance. As the final minutes ticked down, he thought about the aliens' reaction when these massive ships appeared in their midst. The hegemony had spent 15 years convinced they were fighting a conventional war against a primitive species. They were about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in the technology they could see, but in the plans they couldn't. 1 minute to launch, Atlas announced. The Legacy fleet was about to make its presence known to the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same. Lieutenant Ashley Cooper descended the maintenance shaft toward the Thermopyla's core, each step taking her closer to what the rest of the galaxy considered suicide. Through the transparent diamond steel walls, she could see the artificial star that powered the massive Dreadnought, its contained fury casting everything in a beautiful, terrible light. Core temperature holding steady at 15 million Kelvin. Her second-in-command, Mike Rodriguez, reported through the comm. Magnetic containment fields at 97% efficiency. Ashley reached the main engineering hub, a cathedral-like chamber built around the stellar core. Dozens of engineers worked at their stations, monitoring the delicate dance between raw power and control. The aliens had called it madness, building ships around contained stars, but humanity had always been good at dancing with fire. Athena, she called out to the engineering AI, "Show me the containment field harmonics." A holographic display materialized, showing the complex patterns that kept their artificial sun from destroying the ship. Unlike the restricted AIs used by the Galactic community, Athena was a true partner, her consciousness integrated with the ship's systems at a level that would make most aliens recoil in horror. "Field harmonics are optimal, Lieutenant." Athena's voice carried a hint of pride. "The modifications you suggested last week have improved efficiency by 3.2%. Status report." Commander Reynolds' voice came through the command channel. "Engineering, are we ready for combat operations?" Ashley watched the stellar core pulse, its power flowing through the ship's veins like lifeblood. "Engineering reports ready, sir. The heart is strong." That's what they called it. The heart. Not just a power source, but the living center of their massive vessel. While other species relied on safe antimatter reactors or quantum tap generators, humanity had chosen to build their ships around stars. "Multiple heat signatures detected," Athena announced. "The hegemony fleet is moving into position. They haven't detected us yet." Ashley moved to the main control platform, her hands dancing across the holographic interface. "Begin power distribution to combat systems. Divert emergency capacity to the forward shields." The core pulsed brighter in response, its contained power ready to be unleashed. Around her, the engineering team moved with practiced precision, each person playing their part in the symphony of controlled chaos. "Lieutenant," Rodriguez called out, "remember when we first saw the core? Back in training." She smiled, remembering their first day aboard. The instructors had shown them videos of alien engineers reacting to the concept, their horror, their certainty that no species would be mad enough to power their ships with stars. "They never understood," she replied, checking the final power distribution grid. "Humanity doesn't just use technology. We form relationships with it. We don't fear the fire. We learn to dance with it." The ship shuddered slightly as it began moving into attack position. Through the engineering viewport, Ashley could see the other dreadnoughts, their own hearts burning bright, against Neptune's storms. "All stations report combat ready," Athena announced. "Stellar core operating at maximum safe parameters. We are go for combat operations." Ashley took a deep breath, feeling the vibration of the ship through her boots. They'd trained for this moment for years, but nothing could truly prepare them for what was coming. The hegemony was about to learn why humanity had been so patient, so willing to seem weak. "Engineering to bridge," she called. "The heart is strong, Commander, ready to show the galaxy what humanity can do." As the final launch countdown began, Ashley Cooper stood before the stellar core, watching its power flow through the ship. The aliens had called them primitive, reckless, insane. They were about to learn that sometimes the greatest achievements come from doing what everyone else thinks is impossible. 30 seconds to combat emergence, Athena announced. In the reflected light of their artificial sun, humanity's engineers prepared to change the course of the war. The heart of the Thermopylae beat strong, ready to show the galaxy that what they called madness, humanity called innovation. Admiral Marcus Bradley watched the hegemony's impenetrable defense line from the bridge of the UVS Sparta, his expression hard as granite. The alien fleet had arranged themselves in the Tesseract formation, a three-dimensional grid pattern that had never been breached in the history of galactic warfare. All ships report ready for synchronized jump, his tactical officer, Lieutenant James Wilson, reported. Emergence points calculated to within 1 meter tolerance. The bridge crew of the Sparta maintained their composure, but the electric tension in the air was undeniable. They were about to attempt something that the aliens had declared physically impossible, a mass precision jump inside an active battle formation. Signal the fleet, Bradley ordered, his voice steady. Execute jump on my mark. Remember, we only get one chance to show them what these ships can do. The massive dreadnoughts, hidden until now in Neptune's storms, aligned themselves for the jump. Their stellar cores pulsed in unison, building power for what would become known as the most audacious military maneuver in human history. Emergence points locked, Wilson confirmed. The hegemony remains unaware. Their sensors are still focused on Earth's defense fleet. Bradley allowed himself a grim smile. Let's show them why humanity doesn't play by their rules. All ships, jump. Space itself seemed to fold as 7 massive vessels, each the size of a small moon, performed a synchronized slip-space jump. The laws of physics screamed in protest as the dreadnoughts tore through reality, emerging exactly where the aliens thought nothing could possibly appear, inside their own formation. The Thermopylae materialized less than a kilometer from the hegemony flagship, its massive hull blocking out the stars. The Marathon emerged behind their supply lines, while the Leonidas appeared below their defensive screen. In a single moment, the most advanced fleet in the galaxy found itself looking up at the business end of humanity's best-kept secret. By the eternal void, an intercepted hegemony transmission crackled through the command channel. How did they? Those ships are impossible. All ships, weapons free, Bradley commanded. Show them what impossible looks like. The Thermopylae fired first, a concentrated burst of solar plasma from its core, heated to temperatures that made stars look cool. 3 hegemony capital ships simply ceased to exist. Their advanced shields might as well have been tissue paper. The Marathon's rail guns opened up next, launching projectiles at speeds that the aliens had deemed too dangerous to attempt. Entire squadrons of enemy ships were torn apart by kinetic impacts that ignored their defensive screens completely. Enemy fleet attempting to regroup, Wilson reported, his voice tight with controlled excitement. They're trying to establish a new defense line. Not today, Bradley responded. Signal the Leonidas. Execute maneuver broken mirror. The Leonidas, smallest of the dreadnoughts but still larger than anything the hegemony had ever built, activated its experimental gravity wave generator. Space rippled as the device reached out and simply moved enemy ships like pieces on a chessboard, scattering their formation to the solar winds. Sir, Wilson called out, Hegemony Command is broadcasting on all frequencies. They're demanding to know what we are. Bradley stood from his command chair, looking out at the chaos their arrival had caused. Send them our response. The message we prepared. Across every channel, in every language the galactic community used, the same words echoed. You called us primitive. You called us reckless. You never asked yourselves why we let you think that. This is humanity unchained. These are the ships you said we couldn't build. This is the beginning of the end of your war. The battle, if it could even be called that, continued around them as the Dreadnoughts systematically dismantled the greatest fleet in known space. The hegemony's carefully planned formations, their centuries of tactical doctrine, meant nothing against ships that rewrote the rules of warfare with their very existence. Humanity's last wave had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. War leader Vaxhur watched in horror as the impossible continued to unfold before him. His command deck, once a model of hegemony efficiency, had devolved into chaos as reports of human tactics flooded every channel. They're using their damaged sections as weapons. His second-in-command shrieked, multiple eyes widening in disbelief. The UES Marathon just deliberately detached an entire hull segment and launched it at our line. Vaxhur's tentacles writhed in agitation as he watched the massive piece of human engineering tear through his fleet's formation, its momentum turning it into a kilometers-long projectile. No sane species would deliberately damage their own capital ships, yet the humans were doing it with calculated precision. New contact. The sensor officer's crystalline form pulsed with alarm. The Thermopylae is, by the void, they're charging directly at our center mass. Through the main viewport, Vaxhur watched the massive human vessel accelerate toward them, its artificial star burning like a challenge to physics itself. His tactical computer screamed warnings. No ship that size should be able to move that fast, turn that sharply, or survive the stresses they were subjecting it to. Evasive action, he commanded, but it was too late. The Thermopylae didn't try to avoid the hegemony's return fire. It simply absorbed the hits, its shields flaring like aurora, and kept coming. Incoming transmission from the human vessel, his communications officer reported. The human commander's voice filled the bridge, carrying an edge of what sounded almost like amusement. You built your ships to survive. We built ours to win. There's a difference. A previously hidden weapon port opened along the Thermopylae's flank, and Vaxhur finally understood why humans had been denied entry to the galactic community. Not because they were primitive, but because they were too dangerous to be allowed to develop unchecked. Sir, his second-in-command's voice cracked. The UES Leonidas is using its gravity device to collect our dead ships. They're creating some kind of battle screen. Vaxhur watched as the humans demonstrated yet another tactic that no species would consider, using their own destroyed vessels and those of their enemies as improvised armor, creating a moving wall of debris that their ships could hide behind. These aren't tactics, he muttered, understanding finally dawning. This is how they think. Every impossible thing they're doing. They planned this. They let us think they were desperate. Let us think we were winning. His strategic display updated with fresh horror. The human dreadnoughts were now working in concert with their regular fleet, the smaller ships using the massive vessels as mobile fortress platforms. Fighters would launch from behind the dreadnought's shield coverage, strike with devastating precision, then return to safety before the hegemony could respond. Sir, we're receiving reports from all sectors. The communications officer's voice was heavy with defeat. The humans, they're not just fighting us. They're studying us. Each attack is different, testing new methods, new combinations. A memory surfaced in Vaxhur's mind. A warning given by the first contact team that had discovered Earth. They learn through conflict. Every battle makes them stronger. Every loss teaches them. And they never, ever fight the same way twice. Battle Group 7 reports complete loss of cohesion. His second-in-command announced. The humans are using their artificial stars to create localized space-time distortions. Our formation is breaking apart. Vaxhur watched as his fleet, the pride of the hegemony, was systematically dismantled by ships that shouldn't exist, using tactics that shouldn't work, crewed by beings that should have surrendered years ago. "Now we know," he said quietly, as the massive form of the Thermopylae loomed ever closer. "Now we know why they smiled when we called them primitive. They weren't building a fleet. They were building our nightmare." The last thing Vaxer saw before ordering a retreat was the artificial star at the Thermopylae's heart, burning with the same intensity he'd seen in every human's eyes. Uncontrolled, uncontrollable, and utterly unafraid. Commander Rachel Morrison of the destroyer UES Valiant watched her tactical display with fierce pride as the greatest naval dance in human history unfolded. Her small but lethal ship darted between the massive forms of the Dreadnoughts, part of a complex battle strategy 15 years in the making. "Thermopylae is opening a gap in their shield coverage," her tactical officer announced. "Strike Package Delta. You have your window. Hit them hard and come home." A squadron of human fighters screamed through the opening, their formation tight, as they exploited the momentary weakness the Dreadnought had created. Behind them, the massive ship's artificial star flared, creating a wave of energy that masked the fighters' retreat. "This is what we trained for," Morrison broadcasted to her strike group. "The Dreadnoughts aren't just our big guns. They're our force multipliers. Show them what Earth's combined fleet can do." The hegemony had expected the human Dreadnoughts to be clumsy behemoths, easy to outmaneuver if not to overpower. Instead, they found themselves facing an integrated fleet action, unlike anything in galactic history. The massive ships moved with impossible grace, creating opportunities that the smaller vessels exploited with surgical precision. UES Marathon is beginning its attack run, Lieutenant Sarah Parker reported from her station. "They're going to need cover on their starboard flank." Morrison nodded, her hands dancing across the command interface. "Strike groups 2 through 5. Form up on me. We're going hunting." The Valiant led its wolf pack through the chaos of battle, using the Marathon's massive bulk as both shield and distraction. While the hegemony fleet focused on the Dreadnought's devastating main guns, Morrison's ships slipped through their defense screen, targeting propulsion systems and weapon nodes with precise strikes. "New tactical pattern from the Leonidas," the comms officer called out. "They're designating it orbital dance." Morrison watched as the Dreadnought used its gravity wave generator to create a swirling vortex of debris and disabled ships. But this wasn't just destruction for its own sake. The spatial distortions created a series of safe corridors that human ships could navigate but hegemony targeting systems couldn't track. "All ships, exploit those corridors," she ordered. "The Dreadnoughts are giving us the openings. Let's make them count." Her strike group dove through the gravitational maze, emerging behind a hegemony battle group that never saw them coming. The aliens had trained to fight either capital ships or strike craft. They had never imagined having to deal with both working in perfect synchronization. "Thermopylae is signaling," Parker announced. "They're preparing for maneuver Solar Wind." Morrison's eyes widened slightly. They'd only practiced this maneuver in simulations. It had been deemed too dangerous for real combat training. "All ships, clear the engagement zone. Formation Delta 7. Prepare for radiation surge." The massive Dreadnought's stellar core began to pulse with increasing intensity. As radiation warnings blared across every ship in the fleet, the Thermopylae released a controlled solar flare. The electromagnetic pulse overwhelming the hegemony's sensitive electronics, while human ships, specially shielded for this tactic, struck from multiple vectors. "By all the stars," her executive officer breathed, watching the display. "We're actually doing it. Everything we planned, everything we prepared for." Morrison allowed herself a grim smile as she watched another hegemony formation crumble under the combined assault. "This is why we let them think they were winning. Every battle, every retreat, we were learning their patterns, testing their responses. And all the while, these beautiful giants were waiting in the shadows." The space around them lit up as the Marathon's rail guns unleashed another salvo, the kinetic rounds leaving trails of ionized gas in their wake. Morrison's strike group was already moving to exploit the gaps those shots would create, their smaller ships dancing between the giants like lightning between storm clouds. This was humanity's true strength, not just the power of their dreadnoughts or the skill of their crews, but the ability to combine them into something greater than the sum of their parts. The dance of giants had begun, and the galaxy would never forget its steps. Admiral Marcus Bradley stood at the center of the Thermopyla's bridge, his expression set in stone as he watched the hegemony's main fleet approach. They'd committed their reserves, bringing in ships from every corner of their empire in a desperate bid to turn the tide. "They still don't understand," he said quietly, more to himself than to his crew. "They think these ships are our greatest weapons. They never consider that the ships themselves are just the delivery system." Lieutenant Davidson looked up from her station, her eyes meeting the Admiral's. She was one of the few who knew the true purpose of the Dreadnought's design. "Stellar core temperature rising on command, sir. We're approaching critical threshold." The massive fleet of hegemony ships filled their view screens. Thousands of vessels gathered from across their empire. Under normal circumstances, it would have been an overwhelming force. But these were not normal circumstances. "Send the signal to all ships," Bradley ordered. "Operation Supernova is go. Begin core destabilization sequence." The bridge crew's movements became more deliberate, each person aware that they were now operating on a timeline that couldn't be stopped. The artificial star at the heart of their ship had always been designed for this moment. "Message from engineering," Commander Reynolds reported. "Lieutenant Cooper reports the containment fields are ready for controlled failure. She says, the heart knows it's time." Bradley nodded, remembering the day they'd first tested this sequence in simulation. The aliens had called them mad for building ships around artificial stars. They never guessed that the true madness was building those stars to go nova on command. "Enemy fleet is moving into optimal position," Tactical reported. "They're arranging themselves in A-sphere formation, trying to trap us." "Trap us?" Bradley allowed himself a grim smile. "They're arranging themselves for maximum effect. Send to all human ships. Clear the blast radius. Operation Supernova commences in 10 minutes. The smaller ships of Earth's fleet began their withdrawal, using the confusion of battle to slip away. The hegemony commanders, thinking they had their prey cornered, pressed their advantage. "Core temperature approaching critical," Davidson announced. "Point of no return in 5 minutes." Bradley opened a channel to the entire ship. "All hands, this is the Admiral. You all knew when you were chosen for this crew that the Thermopyla was built for a single, ultimate purpose. Today, we fulfill that purpose. Emergency pods are armed and ready. All non-essential personnel, begin evacuation." He watched as the escape pods began launching, carrying most of his crew to safety. The bridge team remained at their posts, each having volunteered for this final act long ago. "Core destabilization at 70%, engineering reported. The reaction is self-sustaining now. Nothing can stop it." Bradley opened a channel to the enemy fleet. "Attention hegemony forces. 15 years ago, you came to our world, thinking you found an easy target. You called us primitive, called us reckless, said we didn't understand the proper way to wage war." He paused, watching the temperature readings climb. "You were right about one thing. We are reckless. Reckless enough to build a ship around a star, and reckless enough to let that star die when the time is right." The first signs of understanding began to show in the enemy fleet's movements, but it was too late. The artificial star at the heart of the Thermopyla had passed the point of no return. 1 minute to critical, Davidson reported calmly. "It was an honor, Admiral." Bradley looked at his remaining crew, the volunteers who would ensure the ship stayed on course until the very end. The honor was mine. For Earth, for humanity, for everyone who dreamed that one day we would show the galaxy what we're truly capable of. As the final seconds ticked down, the artificial star began its death throes. The hegemony fleet, finally understanding their danger, tried to retreat. But they had arranged themselves too perfectly around their target, too close to escape what was coming. The last thing Admiral Bradley saw was the core temperature reading passing critical mass, and he smiled. They had built these ships not to survive, but to win, and win they would. The heart of the Thermopylae went nova, and the light of its sacrifice outshone the stars themselves. The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as the final recording played out. The brilliant flash of light that had once been the UES Thermopylae, taking with it a heart of the hegemony fleet. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of history being rewritten. Lieutenant Thomas Wright stood before the council, his dress uniform bearing the new insignia of Earth's combined fleet. Behind him, the holograms showed the remaining Dreadnoughts, Marathon, Leonidas, and Sparta, now positioned as silent guardians around human space. You built ships to break every rule of warfare. High Counselor Zixtal finally spoke, their mandibles clicking in agitation. You hid them for generations, letting us think we were winning, all while preparing for this moment. We built them because you left us no choice. Wright responded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had witnessed history unfold. When you denied us membership in your community, called us too aggressive, too unpredictable, you forced us to prove you right. The chamber's displays shifted, showing the devastating effectiveness of the human fleet's combined operations. The Dreadnoughts working in perfect symphony with smaller ships, each movement choreographed through years of secret training. Your Admiral Bradley, another council member, a being of pure energy, pulsed with curiosity. He and his crew, they knew from the beginning that the Thermopylae was built to be sacrificed. Wright nodded, his expression solemn. Every crew member aboard volunteered, knowing what the final mission would be. That's something your strategic models never accounted for. Humans don't just fight for victory. We fight for each other. The council chambers erupted in murmurs as the implications sank in. The humans hadn't just built impossible ships. They had created a strategy that required levels of sacrifice and coordination that most species would consider unthinkable. And now, Zixtal asked, their compound eyes reflecting the images of the remaining Dreadnoughts, what are your terms? Wright stepped forward, his voice clear and firm. Peace. Real peace, not the kind you tried to force on us. Earth will take its place among the galactic community, not as a subject race, but as equals. He gestured to the displays. Those ships you see, they're not just weapons. They're a promise that humanity will never again be dismissed as primitive or reckless. We see risks as challenges to overcome, not walls to stop us. The High Counselor's mandibles clicked in what might have been grudging respect. And the technology, the artificial stars, the gravity manipulation, will remain ours, Wright finished. But we're willing to collaborate on new technologies, new ways of thinking. That's the choice before you now. Continue to fear what makes us different, or learn to work with it. The chamber fell silent again, as the council members communicated among themselves through their neural networks. Finally, Zixtal spoke again. We underestimated your species, Lieutenant Wright. We saw your willingness to take risks as a weakness, your integration of AI as a danger, your unconventional tactics as a sign of desperation. No, Wright corrected them gently. You saw us exactly as we wanted you to see us. Every retreat, every seeming defeat, it was all part of the plan. We needed you to think you had us figured out. He turned to leave the chamber, pausing at the doorway. The peace treaty has already been transmitted to your systems. We look forward to your response. And remember, The next time you look at the stars and see one of our dreadnoughts, remember why we built them. Not because we wanted to, but because you convinced us we had to. As the human diplomat left the chamber, the council members watched the final images of the battle play out. The Thermopyla's last moment, its artificial heart going nova not in defeat, but in carefully planned victory. It was a message written in light and fire. Humanity would no longer be underestimated. A new dawn had come to the galaxy, and with it, a new understanding. What the Council had dismissed as primitive had proven to be revolutionary. What they had feared as reckless had become their salvation. Humanity had arrived, and the stars themselves would never be the same.